Not to understate the obvious, but World War II was a vastly complex enterprise. A true test of every bit of bravery, ingenuity, and perseverance the human being is likely capable of exerting. And counterintuitively to some, the most important aspect governing the outcome of the war was not in the quality of armor or aircraft or navy of each individual nation involved, nor was it the steel and courageousness of the men and women who fought and died, although these were surely a factor on both sides. No, the greatest weapon that could be wielded was that of intelligence, of information, as to the enemy's strategies and resources, so that effective countermeasures could be deployed and implemented at the right times. The best laid plans, so to speak, could be overturned by the leaking of information into the enemy's hands through carelessness, spy networks, and code-breaking devices. As the saying went, loose lips sink ships, even underwater ships similar to this one. Likely the most well-known of all of these was the German Enigma machine. At a time when computer technology was practically non-existent in comparison to what's commonplace today, Enigma was an extremely complex cipher device that enabled the Germans to secretly communicate over vast distances, providing a huge advantage against the Allies. Considered to be virtually impenetrable, the German High Command was confident in sending even the most top-secret messages through its electrical circuits. Eventually, however, Enigma was cracked, and arguably the decryption, along with several other ciphers utilized by the Axis powers, not only shortened the war substantially and saved countless lives, but it also likely altered the war's outcome completely. Now, for scientists studying the world today, one of the greatest challenges in understanding the creatures in it involves unlocking the incredibly complex coded language system known as DNA. And many of them ponder its origin and want to know whether there are clues within it that can answer that. Broadly speaking, there are only two basic options to choose from as to where it could have come from. It either evolved naturalistically through materialistic processes involving no mind in its creation, or it was created. So let's think through these things and see if we can solve this puzzle. A few years ago, my wife and I were walking on the beach at Niagara-on-the-Lake near Niagara Falls in Ontario, and we came across a one-word message written with driftwood that simply said, "Hi." As it captured a concept that was quite similar to an example I've used for years in various presentations, I snapped a quick picture of it and posted it on our Answers in Genesis Canada Facebook page, along with the following text. Walking on the beach in Niagara-on-the-Lake and saw this on the sand. No thinking person would say something as foolish as, "Hey, look at what the wind and the tide brought in." That's because natural forces cannot create coded language systems. Language has always been observed to be because of the result of an intelligent mind. And yet state-run schools all over the Western world teach students that DNA, the most sophisticated coded language system ever discovered, is the result of naturalistic evolution. Now, to no one's surprise, this quickly ignited a barrage of comments from some atheist types railing against the idea, arguing that DNA was not a true coded language system. So I answered back and quoted one of their own, Professor Richard Dawkins. And whether you like him or not, Dawkins' credentials are impressive. He's a former holder of the Chair of Public Understanding of Science at Oxford University. And as the old saying goes, you don't get that piece of paper out of a Cracker Jack box. But according to the Facebook feedback group, I guess even the highly educated, widely read arch materialist Richard Dawkins didn't get the same memo as the local village atheists, because in one of his best-selling books, he wrote the following. After Watson and Crick, we know that genes themselves, within their minute internal structure, are long strings of pure digital information. What is more, they are truly digital in the full and strong sense of computers and compact disks, not in the weak sense of the nervous system. The genetic code is not a binary code as in computers, nor an 8-level code as in some telephone systems, but a quaternary code with 4 symbols. The machine code of the genes is uncannily computer-like. Apart from differences in jargon, the pages of a molecular biology journal might be interchanged with those of a computer engineering journal. Our genetic system, which is the universal system of all life on the planet, is digital to the core. With word-for-word accuracy, you could encode the whole of the New Testament in those parts of the human genome that are at present filled with junk DNA. That is, DNA not used, at least in the ordinary way, by the body. Every cell in your body contains the equivalent of 46 immense data tapes, reeling off digital characters via numerous reading heads working simultaneously. In every cell, these tapes, the chromosomes, contain the same information, but the reading heads in different kinds of cells seek out different parts of the database for their own specialist purposes. Genes are pure information that can be encoded, recoded, and decoded without any degradation or change of meaning. Pure information can be copied and, since it is digital information, the fidelity of the copying can be immense. DNA characters are copied with an accuracy that rivals anything modern engineers can do. So, despite skeptics often whinging about how DNA isn't a real code, Dawkins describes it as truly digital in the full and strong sense of computers and compact disks. Now, is he the only one? Apparently, he's not, as there seem to be several Oxford-educated scientists that are recognizing this as well. They and many others have come together under the Voices of Oxford, the Vox banner, along with several outside investors, to set up a contest where the winner can claim a $10 million prize by solving what they claim is the #1 question in all of science, namely, where did the information come from? Now, just to quiet the "it's not really coded information" crowd before they get started, I want to emphasize what this Oxford-led group means when it asks for the origin of information in their own words. Every cell reproduces itself from digital instructions stored in DNA. DNA has the same features as modern digital devices: layers of digital encoding, decoding, and data storage, error detection, error correction, and repair, plus an ability to adapt that beggars the imagination. Now, just in case skeptics might somehow think that this is some motley group of outliers that are saying this, let's emphasize that none of them are professing creationists. All of them adhere to the general theory of evolution, and they contain distinguished scientists well known and respected by the evolutionary establishment. Among them is Oxford professor Denis Noble, praised as a scientist extraordinaire by his peers. He's the first person to build a computer model of an organ, the heart, and his discoveries have made pacemakers possible. As a matter of fact, Noble is just one of 3 people that will judge the outcome, along with George Church and Michael Ruse. Now, Church is a geneticist, molecular engineer, and a chemist. He's a professor of genetics at Harvard Medical School and a professor of health sciences and technology at Harvard and MIT. And he was a founding member of the Weiss Institute for Biologically Inspired Engineering at Harvard. Ruse specializes in the philosophy of biology. He's the director of the program in the philosophy of the history of science at Florida State University, is a fellow of both the Royal Society of Canada and the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and holds honorary doctorates from the University of Bergen, McMaster University, the University of New Brunswick, and University of College London. He's also the author of numerous books, including Darwinism and Design, Atheism, What Everyone Needs to Know, and Science, Evolution, and Religion. So, to say this group included has earned its accolades is an understatement, as it includes one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people from 2017 and one of the top 100 scientists in the United Kingdom. Now, under a section titled "What You Must Do to Win the Prize," the following criteria is laid out. You must arrange for a digital communication system to emerge or self-evolve without cheating. The diagram below describes the system. Without explicitly designing the system, your experiment must generate an encoder that sends digital code to a decoder. Your system needs to transmit at least 5 bits of information. In other words, it has to be able to represent 32 states. The genetic code supports 64. Well, that sounds pretty simple, doesn't it? Just arrange an experiment that will naturalistically produce a digital communication system that generates an encoder that sends at least 5 bits of digital code to a decoder. Oh, and you can't cheat either, i.e. no intelligence allowed. And by the way, you'd better hope that the decoder that just happens to randomly generate is capable of decoding the exact code that randomly generates from the encoding device that randomly generates. I mean, it would be a real shame if the decoding device that randomly generated was set to decode a different randomly generated code. Kind of like if you were trying to listen to this, but you only spoke Spanish and didn't have the decoding apparatus to decode the English language. Try to imagine how such a thing is even possible, let alone remotely likely to have occurred sometime in the past. How can such intelligent people imagine such a thing when it's never been seen to occur in all of human history? And one wonders, if the contestants are to arrange such an experiment, but not add any intelligent input, computing or designing, etc., then what activities should they initiate? What exactly should contestants do? Throw some mud on the ground and take out their microscopes to wait for the magic to happen? Perhaps we should zap some more chemical compounds like the failed Stanley Miller experiment did years ago, and several times since, to see if life will emerge this time. I mean, if we need to arrange this to happen, but it must emerge or self-evolve without intelligent input, doesn't that mean we should just try to be as observant as possible to the natural world around us to try and spot this miracle happening in the moment? It's not exactly like humans haven't been observing their surroundings for hundreds of years now, and with some incredibly sophisticated technology to boot. It's actually fascinating to read excerpts from the website advertising the contest, as the answers to what they're calling the mystery seems pretty obvious to the average Christ follower, i.e. God did it. It is, however, worth the read to watch these brilliant minds struggle to understand life's biggest questions without God. How do living things repair and heal themselves, adapt to any situation you can imagine, and make choices? The genetic engineering capabilities of cells, which are discussed in the book Evolution 2.0, are not known to most people. But an answer suggests staggering implications for medicine, technology, and the environment. How do cells know how to evolve? No human software does that. Give software millions of chances and billions of years, and all it will do is crash. But life adapts relentlessly. How does it do this? What do cells know that we don't? And what about consciousness? In the human realm, only conscious beings create and modify code. Where does consciousness come from? Are cells self-aware? The Evolution 2.0 prize focuses these issues down to one central question. How do you get from chemicals to code? How do you get a code without designing one? Now, if you sum up their conclusions, it can be stated simply. DNA exhibits every quality that known coded language systems have, except it's far beyond anything we've ever come close to creating. So for those out there objecting and saying DNA isn't like other codes, we know. It's actually way better than other codes because the creator of DNA is far greater than any creator of any other code. But it is a code, as is summed up by their website's final central question. How do you get a code without designing one? Well, the obvious answer is you don't. I mean, have we ever observed a coded language system coming into being without an intelligent designer? No. So, do we know how codes are made? Yes. Observational science confirms codes are the result of intelligence, and we don't have a single example that contradicts that fact. So why would you believe the most sophisticated language system ever observed came about without a mind? It's as simple as this. Dishes don't clean themselves, clothes don't fold themselves, and documents don't make copies of themselves via random processes. Even if those processes are automated, an intelligent mind is behind all such acts. As incredibly complicated as the submarine I'm sitting in is, with all of the impressive functionality and brilliant engineering it represents in terms of tasks it can perform, the simplest of living things science can observe and study on the planet Earth blow this piece of human hardware off the maps in terms of sophisticated complexity and design. So why would intelligent scientists propose that these types of tasks, with the voluminous amounts of coded genetic information needed to initiate and govern their function inside living things, come from lifeless chemicals? Well, likely to avoid the obvious and most logical conclusion. God, the only sufficient cause we know, did it. Just look at these caveats posted in their rules. Important note: general essays presenting a theory of everything and metaphysical constructions about the history of life unfortunately cannot be considered. Please do not submit materials of this kind. We are looking for entries that offer quantifiable technological progress. It's actually mind-boggling when you parse this out. Here we see incredibly intelligent, gifted people who, under any other circumstance, if asked the question as to where any other code or language or message or information came from, would have a ready answer, because everyone knows codes are created by intelligent minds. But in the case of where the language of life came from, they replace logic and knowledge with a theophobic ideology that automatically eliminates an intelligent creator, because ultimately that would mean someone else owns them and that they are therefore responsible to their creator. If God is automatically excluded from the conclusion, no one will ever arrive at the proper understanding. It is, as 2 Timothy 3:7 says, they will always be learning and never able to arrive at a knowledge of the truth. So let's learn some specifics about what these scientists are trying to uncover: the incredible coded language system known as DNA. Similar to how the English and other languages' alphabets have symbolic letters, DNA is like a very long string of letters utilizing its own unique language. The information in DNA is stored as a code made up of 4 chemical letters called nucleotides: adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine. And these bases are read 3 at a time, effectively providing for up to 64 different words called codons. Now, these words are similar to the way in which letters of the alphabet can be arranged into words that form meaningful sentences and provide the information available for the construction, function, and maintenance of an organism. And like the biggest jigsaw puzzle you can imagine, they are ordered by the millions. Think of DNA like a library of books or instruction manuals that contain everything about a creature and how to assemble and maintain its functionality. Analogously, each library or genome has books of information we call chromosomes, and each book of information has chapters in them made up of sentences we call genes. The chapters are groups of genes that are read in a coordinated way, operons, for example. Now, the genes in each of us determine specific traits we'll have, such as blue or brown eyes, or blonde or dark hair, or short or tall height, etc., with the coding for each of these genes being spelled out in sections along the length of our DNA. Honest scientists admit the DNA code itself is by far the most sophisticated code known to man, because its ability to store information is astonishing. However, most people have no idea of the true level of complexity scientists are discovering inside this molecular marvel. Let's show a few examples in simplistic terms to illustrate. One of the most amazing things about DNA coding is that there are overlapping genes, where more than one lot of information is stored in the same broad area of letters. For example, just so you can get the point, even though this isn't an actual textbook case, let's say the information to build proteins for brown hair. Well, that might overlap information to build your toes, depending on where you start reading. Computer programmers refer to this type of concept as data compression. And to understand it, let's use a sequence of letters in a sentence to see how we could get 2 different sets of information from within the exact same order of letters. My therapist has brown hair. Now, if you state it this way, the sequence of letters has a certain meaning. But what if you were to start just a little further down at the second word, and we're fudging here a bit because DNA doesn't have spaces, but what if we were to put a space after the first 3 letters? It would now say, the rapist has brown hair. Now you can see this has a completely different meaning. And even coming up with that sentence to illustrate the idea of overlapping coding was a challenge for me, and I suppose an expert enigmatologist could probably have come up with a much better example. But just try it yourself sometime. It's not that easy. However, as tricky as this 23-letter sentence I just mentioned might be to overlap, at least for me, DNA coding is far more sophisticated than this. When you consider that the average human gene contains thousands of words, nucleotide triplets, or codons, you start to realize the magnitude of what we're talking about here. When comparing overlapping genes to written paragraphs, this is like having two completely different 500-word articles overlaying each other. And by starting at a different point in the text, a completely different story would be read. Even more incredible is the fact that at least some overlapping genes can be read backwards as well as forwards. And this would be like writing a story, and then by starting at a certain point near the end and reading it backwards, a completely different story would be told, with perfect spelling and punctuation. Let the most brilliant enigmatologists beware. No one has ever accomplished anything close to this. It's considered virtually impossible. And any person who could design such a code would be considered a superhuman. So the big idea I'm belaboring here is this. The more clever the puzzle, the more clever the designer. And because codes and languages require a creator, we recognize the intelligence behind this greatest code comes from the most intelligent mind we can imagine, the all-knowing, all-powerful Creator God of the Bible. Information itself as an entity is an incredible problem for naturalists to explain, let alone the incredible multi-layered coding that we observe within DNA, much more of which likely hasn't even been discovered yet. So concluding God created DNA certainly isn't a God of the gaps type argument, we don't know, so God must have done it. We do know where information comes from, an intelligent mind. And again, we intuitively understand that the more sophisticated the information is, the more sophisticated the mind that created it must be. Knowledge, as they say, is power. And God need not be an enigma to those who don't know Him personally yet. The mystery of whether there's a creator God needn't be puzzling at all. And the complete story of who God is and what He's done for us isn't difficult and can be found by reading His Word, the Holy Bible. And there you'll find the truth, the life, and the way through Jesus Christ. As it says in Romans 1:20, "For His invisible attributes, namely His eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world, in the things that have been made, so that they are without excuse."